Alright everyone, time for a follow-up video with regards to the Trump tax return bullshit thing. Of course, this will probably be the only other video I make on it because it's already being supplanted in the news cycle. It's interesting, this is supposedly the world's biggest bombshell. The President of the United States cheated on his taxes for 10 years or something. That's not even what the New York Times story alleges. What they're alleging is that he paid little taxes for multiple years in direct federal. Of course, you would still end up with a rate that was in the teens because the self-employment penalty still exists. That he paid little in federal taxes over the course of several years because of business losses, because of write-offs, writing off losses, writing off expenditures. That's something that the self-employed do. I take write-offs in my taxes, and I pay more of a tax rate than Trump. This points to a systemic problem with a tax code that was created by Democrats and Republicans while Biden was in the Senate, while people like Harris were running the show, not people like Trump. Trump's tax reform, as far as the write-off side of it, is a 20% offset for what people like me suffer. Small businesses, farmers, the self-employed, the middle and upper middle class, self-employed sort of entrepreneurial people, hundreds of thousands of people across the country have received extreme discounts on their taxes. Many more within the working and middle class in a more general sense also got relief as well. As far as a ratio of tax to savings, the middle and working classes got the biggest bonus. This is openly admitted to, but it's an open secret that nonetheless is believed by only half the population because there was a coordinated propaganda campaign against the Trump tax cuts. However, this bombshell, as it's being labeled by CNN, front page news, yesterday, now coronaviruses, of course, the New York Times, the Atlantic, it was totally non-coordinated, by the way. There was no coordination. Like wildfire, bombshell reporting, Trump is a tax cheat. Again, that's a misinterpretation even of the New York Times report. It's going to fall flat, and I'll tell you why. Number one, the proof is in the pudding. If we look at the news cycle, there's a reason that these sites have all pivoted away from even mentioning it on page B at the moment in favor of coronavirus. Coronavirus is largely a dead issue at this point. Even CNN has a fucking article referencing the Swedes and how they've basically declared an end to their epidemic at this point. That's number one. The proof is in the pudding. Just look at their behavior, the way in which they're treating it. It's sort of like how the Dems, there's a tell for how the Democrats are worried about the Ginsburg replacement with Amy Coney Barrett because they're only talking about decorum and standards within politics. They're not even talking about her views. They're not even attacking her for religion or for decisions she's made. They're just talking about, well, it's abnormal that we would appoint her during the election year so close to the election. Well, kind of, sort of, but again, and there is hypocrisy. Even, I think Lindsey Graham pointed this out. Yeah, we're in charge and we're going to have this person on SCOTUS. What do you expect us to do? And by the way, there was already an election to determine that. It's called the 2016 election. When Harris comes out and says, well, the American people should vote before the Senate does. They did. They voted years ago for Trump as president to appoint the SCOTUS replacement and for the GOP in the Senate, even expanding their lead by 2 seats in the midterms. Another reason why this bombshell will fall flat is I can't see any situation in which the New York Times actually reveals the documents it claims that it has. If I say, an unnamed source, let's say that I'm Joe the journalist. I've got my Joe the Journalist Incorporated printing company. I'm making a story about a politician. By the way, public figures, there's a different threshold for defamation lawsuits with regards to this, with litigation. And I say, well, an unnamed source has given me paperwork and it says that this dude kills puppies or something like that. It doesn't matter how hyperbolic it is unless you're alleging a felonious crime. He kicks puppies. He hates his mother. He fucked his father or something like that, making allegations against them. Because of the legalism behind journalism, because of the First Amendment, and I would say somewhat of a misinterpretation of the protections of the press, which is more of an activity than a body, protections towards the media. As long as I claim that it's an anonymous source, I don't necessarily have to divulge that paperwork to prove that what I'm saying is even true. I can claim it, say, well, I've got papers showing that he hates his mother. I know he kicks puppies, but I can't give you my source, and I can't give you the paperwork that the source gave me because it would identify the source. Isn't that slightly fishy to anybody? I'm beginning to believe that maybe the New York Times is not entirely forthcoming about the truth of the situation. I've received no evidence from the New York Times thus far that any of the things that it's claiming are true. The third reason the bombshell is useless is nobody would care even if it is. The Republicans have already spun it. They said, well, yeah, okay, Trump paid very little in taxes. What's wrong with that? That's a good thing. The fact that he understands accounting enough to pull that off, number one. Number two, what, you like taxes? And most Americans would say no. It's like when you poll people on, do you want free shit in the generic sense? Do you want free healthcare, free college, debt forgiveness? Do you want $50,000 a month for free? Everyone says yes until you ask them the real question, which is, do you want to pay a 75% tax rate? Hey, middle classer, do you want to pay most of your productivity to the government? Nobody likes the IRS. If the Democrats intend to have Trump run against the IRS, he will gladly accept that gift. When they realize how badly this could potentially backfire, because I don't think the average American gives a fucking goddamn shit about Trump's taxes because the issue has been talked to death for 5 years, they're going to let it go. It's going to sink like a stone, and they'll pivot back to talking about something that's arguably more substantive, like, I don't know, I don't think that they've got anything at this moment. That's what the Dems will do. You watch over the course of the next week and see if I'm not right. It'll come up at the first debate. It'll be mentioned. They'll try to hardball him. Chris Wallace, who hates Trump, he's a never-Trumper, really. He's like a Lincoln Project Republican in name only. Now, he's going to hardball him and say something, well, you don't pay any federal taxes. What do you have to say about that, you fucking tax cheat? And it'll be funny, and Trump will counter, and he'll say, well, this was illegally obtained. They won't even show you the papers. Why should I pay more taxes than I owe? I just took advantage of a tax. The biggest counter for Trump, I hope he uses this line. If he's queried about his taxes, I hope he mentions that Joe Biden was in the Senate the whole time the tax code was developed. Virtually all of our modern tax code, other than the Trump tax reform that he passed, has to do with the Senate and its incarnation under him, or the Obama presidency where Joe was VP. He was always in favor of the tax code. He voted in favor of all of the tax increases during that period of time. The Democrats and Republicans, the establishment built the tax code that we operate under. This tax code taxes me a surcharge of 15% just for being self-employed, and it allows Trump to write off every business loss. If his casino goes kaput, he can write off every penny of loss. That's the way that it's been until very recently. Now there are some limitations on it, but I mean still, if you've got an army of accountants and lawyers, if you're part of the upper crust, if you're a 1%er, you have the money necessary to skirt around, to navigate the tax laws. People like me, who are not in that part of the population, who are in the middle class somewhere, lower, mid, or upper mid, we can't. I cannot afford the kind of tax attorneys and accountants and stuff necessary to take advantage of that. If I did, if I paid for their fees, it would cost more than my tax bill would be, because I'm not a 1%er yet. And I say yet because I want to be. Absolutely. And that's the other thing. Most of the time, people in the lower classes especially, there is a sort of appreciation for someone who really did put the screws to the system. Trump, if this allegation is even true, he fucked the IRS. He screwed them to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. Who among you wouldn't love to do the same thing? Let me ask that goddamn question. That's for Democrats and Republicans. Do you really like the IRS? Do you really like the fact that you have to pay a massive tax? Or do you like the payroll tax? Trump wants to remove that. Bernie Sanders immediately said, well, he's trying to defund Social Security and Medicare. No, he's not. You can get that elsewhere. You don't need a payroll tax to pay for these things. Have a different tax. There's plenty of different kinds of taxes. We've already got them anyway. Adjust the numbers a few percentage points. Reform the tax code that you helped create. Joe Biden was instrumental. It's like when Joe Biden says, well, there's racial injustice in the country. Dude, 1994, you were one of the chief architects of modern tough-on-crime legislation that stood until very recently when Trump took the floor, hysterically enough, supposedly bigoted Ku Klux Klan-loving Trump with the what was it, the next Second Chances Act or something like that. I can't remember the exact name of it. And that would allow people who had been put in prison literally under the auspices of the 94 crime bill to get out and to have their records expunged so that they can have a meaningful life. If they've done nothing, since then in the sense of violent felonies and so forth. You smoked weed, you did it 3 times, we're going to treat you as a felon. That's Joe Biden's idea. Where was he this entire time since literally the Jimmy Carter administration, and I think actually maybe even a couple of years before that, ironically, where was Joe Biden when it came to police reform, tax reform, or any of these things. So this story will fall apart because it'll become dead weight for Joe Biden. The legacy media is not going to let that weight sit around his neck. They're going to expunge it. They'll shove it to page D, and it'll be funny to watch. You see if in the next week that's not what happens. That's about all. Peace out.